Many legal convictions are gained on the basis of circumstantial evidence, which is the starting point of most cases coming to the attention of law enforcement. Detectives go to work corroborating the facts, using logic and deduction, looking for clues, seeking out physical evidence, and hoping for confessions. But many cases are settled based upon circumstantial evidence because circumstances tell the tale. It's that way in our daily lives, too. The Lord speaks to us through His providential ordering of circumstances. Time and again, we can detect God's guidance, receive His grace, understand His will, and hear His voice through the circumstances that He arranges or allows. The Bible is filled with stories of God using happenings to speak to His people. One entire book of the Bible is devoted to God's providential oversight, the book of Esther. God's name isn't even mentioned once, but the circumstances speak loud and clear. The word God cannot be found in Esther, and there is no direct mention of the Lord, but God's hand is unmistakable behind the unfolding events, as it was when Mordecai told Queen Esther, "Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther 4:14. After the prophet Elijah confronted Ahab, he hid by the brook Cherith and was fed by the ravens. But it happened after a while that the brook dried up. 1 Kings 17:7. That was Elijah's cue to move on to Zarephath. The Apostle Paul was determined to go to Jerusalem at the end of his third missionary trip, not knowing the things that will happen to me there. Acts 20:22. But he later told the Philippians, "I want you to know, brethren, that the things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel." Philippians 1:12. Dr. A.W. Tozer wrote, "To the child of God, there is no such thing as accident. He travels an appointed way. Accidents may indeed appear to befall him, and misfortunes stalk his way, but these evils will be so in appearance only, and will seem evils only because we cannot read the secret script of God's hidden providence. The man of true faith may live in the absolute assurance that his steps are ordered by the Lord." Has God ever spoken to you through a circumstance? Perhaps you have some distressing situations in your life right now. Don't despair. Look for the hidden hand of God's providence. Think of the great heroes of the Bible. Imagine how Joseph felt when his brothers sold him into slavery, but he later told them something astonishing, something that had only become apparent with time. "Do not therefore be grieved, for God sent me before you to preserve life. It was not you who sent me here, but God." Genesis 45:5-8. Think of Ruth entering a town of strangers and gleaning in the fields. When the wealthy landowner Boaz expressed his interest to her, her wise mother-in-law Naomi advised her, "Sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out." Ruth 3:18. Put yourself in the place of the disciples on Lake Galilee when the storm came and they strained at the oars through the night. Yet Jesus had deliberately sent them onto the lake, knowing full well what would happen in the fourth watch when we came to them walking on the water. Almost every biblical hero is a case study in God's omnipotent ability to turn circumstances inside out, redeem the situations of life, and cause all things to work for good in the final analysis. Perhaps you found yourself in a painful situation, or you're grieving the loss of someone dear to you, or you're confused about an upcoming decision. We sometimes have trials heavier than we can bear, and we face disappointments that hit us like an invisible fist to our stomachs. But our disappointments are His appointments. They are God's way of delivering us from the second best, so we'll be free to experience His better choice for us. In such times, it's helpful to simply trust the Lord, be as faithful as possible today, and wait to see what He will do tomorrow. Elizabeth Elliot once quoted a prayer along these lines given to her by her aunt. "Help me to live this day quietly, easily, to lean upon thy great strength trustfully, restfully, to meet others peacefully, joyously, to face tomorrow confidently, courageously." The godly Samuel Rutherford wrote, "You may see but the black side of providence, yet it has a better side, and God will let you see it." Black meaning dark, night, when the lights are off. But you see, we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, according to Romans 8:28. Losses, disappointments, ill tongues, loss of friends, houses, or country are God's workmen, set to work for our good everything that befalls you. He says, let me offer Bob Herrick of Fresno, California, as an example. If you ask him how he got into the banking profession, he'll tell you about graduating from college over 40 years ago and looking for a job. 2 opportunities presented themselves. The job he really wanted was as a sales representative for an agricultural supply company in the San Joaquin Valley. He went through an extensive interview process and felt the job was perfectly suited to him. The other job was with the local bank. Bob sought God's will throughout the process. He interviewed with both potential employers and waited to see what doors God opened. When the phone rang, it was the bank with a job offer. He accepted it once, though it was his second choice. The next day, the agricultural supply company called and offered him the job he had really wanted. But Bob had already accepted the job at the bank and didn't feel he could go back on his word. Was he frustrated? Not at all, he says. I had prayed about it, committed to the Lord, and had perfect peace that he was in control of the circumstances. Looking back over the years, I can see how it worked out wonderfully. Those circumstances established my vocation and my ministry for 4 decades. I discovered that for most people without Christ, money is their God. When they come to the bank, it's almost as if they're coming into their church. When they sit down and to talk to their banker, it's almost as if they're talking to the pastor. There are financial implications to almost every problem we have: divorce, prodigal children, job disruptions, health crises. And people who would never go to church or talk to a preacher come and share their lives with me. I'm often able to talk to them about their spiritual needs and share Christ and even pray with them. God ordered the circumstances of my job search to establish His perfect will for my life, and I praise Him for that. When all sorts of things happen around you, as they do every day, learn to ask yourself, what is God trying to say to me? What is He up to? Basically, also, pray that you learn what you're supposed to learn from every circumstance. When you're going through it, pray that God teaches you what you're supposed to learn and make it worthwhile, so you don't have to keep going through the same old thing. Learn the lessons, apply them, and move on. Ask Him to help you learn the lessons, apply them, and move on. Look for circumstantial evidence of God's will, writes David Jeremiah, and don't yield to despair if things don't immediately work out as you hoped. Behind every happening is the hidden hand of heaven, for our times are in His hands, and our steps are ordered by the Lord. Let's listen to Him when He speaks through circumstances.